very aware that this time in my life, this body of mine, is subject to the its own mortality and humanity. So why me? It has never, ever crossed my mind.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, former journalist, mom, wife, and just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is all about finding more joy together. You'll hear from experts and incredible people who have persevered and conquered through the good, bad, and in between of this life. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. Today, you're going to meet a woman near and dear to my heart. Rebecca Cressman was my very first mentor. She's the one who taught me how to use my voice and how to edit audio. So if you're someone who listens to this podcast, you have already appreciated her skill and her expertise that I was lucky enough to learn from her. Rebecca is a radio host of FM 100.3's Midday show in Salt Lake City, Utah. She's an Emmy-nominated former TV host and continues to guest host television programming in Salt Lake City. Most recently, she has become a cancer patient. Rebecca was diagnosed with breast cancer a few months ago. In between chemo treatments, which is just incredible of her, she came on this podcast to talk about her perspective on life, her thoughts about mortality, insights on losing her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother to the same disease she is now fighting. She also talked about why it's so important to her to continue to do things like coming on this podcast in between chemo, why it's important for her to advocate for breast cancer patients and mammograms. Let's get to her because this is a powerful episode. Please share this episode and kind of commit with me to get the women around you and to get yourself in to get that mammogram. Okay, let's get to the conversation. I like to start these by just giving you the floor to give you a chance to tell me and the audience a little bit about yourself.
I have a lot of different hats that I wear. One of the hats that I wear during the daytime is I'm a host of a radio show in Salt Lake City, Utah, called FM 100.3, and I'm their midday music host, and I'm live for 4 to 5 hours a day. And another hat that I wear, I'm a mom of 3 boys, and they're adults now. They're married. I'm actually a grandma, and I've worked in radio, television, magazine writing, and the biggest definer for me right now is I'm a breast cancer patient right now, currently being treated for stage 2B cancer.
So tell me a little bit, when did you get your diagnosis?
I had my mammogram this year in May. In June, I opened up my mail and saw a report from my mammogram saying, call us right away. There's what's called architectural distortion with associated microcalcifications that have been possibly spotted in the mammogram. And this was the first year I had what's called a 3D mammogram. And those are highly efficient. These are the ones I wanted to be able to have a chance to be screened with in the past, but didn't have access to. But this year I did. And so when I saw those words, it was in June. And right away, I thought, this is not good. It sounds like I may have cancer. And the following week, I was in and I got my diagnosis. What they do is they actually call you back, and I got like a close-up 3D mammogram. Like, let's take a close look at what we're seeing. And the mammogram tech was fantastic. She turned the monitor around and said, "Do you want to see it?" I said, "Absolutely." And I said, "Ooh, that looks doesn't look good, you know." And then they sent me down the hall for an ultrasound. Fairly quickly, within about 10 minutes. And then a radiologist came in within about 15 minutes and did what's called a core biopsy. And they actually go in with a big needle and tug 3 different pieces of this growth. And he had quite a serious look on his face. And the ultrasound itself, it just looked visually, it didn't look round and encased. It looked like what I had seen from my years advocating for breast cancer organizations. It looked like a cancerous growth. So right then my stomach kind of just dropped. And you're not formally notified. It was 24 hours later that they called me and said, it is definitely invasive ductal carcinoma.
Oh my goodness. What were those 24 hours like for you?
Oh, it was surreal because I have had screenings for almost 19 years in a row. Only 10% of women who get breast cancer get it because of genetics and family history.
Wow.
But because my mom died of breast cancer and my grandmother died with breast cancer and my great grandmother died of breast cancer, I had always been invested in making sure I was aware of what was happening in my body. So it was kind of like always watching out for it and then seeing it come true. That was just surreal. And when they did call that 24 hours later, I happened to be at work in the broadcast studio. And my knees kind of buckled and I sat down and I cried. And then I took a deep breath and began to just learn as much as I could. And that was a highly anxious time.
Yeah. Do you think with your family history, losing your mom, grandma, and great grandma, is that all in one line?
Mom and grandma are in one line, great grandma in another line.
Does that
So maternal, mom, maternal grandma, and then, actually it is my maternal great grandma, but from my mom's
Grandpa?
grandfather.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Having that, does that weigh on you as you get this diagnosis? Is that kind of in the back of your mind?
I think their mortality, that they died from it, weighed in my mind. I have always kind of tried to advocate for this idea that if we catch things early, no matter what it is, mental health, physical health problems, we always have a better chance of treatment and a healthier outcome. And so when I first got this diagnosis, the very first scary thing was to tell my children because they knew grandma died from this. And to tell my husband, who were very, very close, 31 years of marriage. I was protective. I didn't let them know until I know for sure, until I got that call that said, yeah,
so
I didn't want to put them through.
You sat for 24 hours with that just on you.
Yeah. I didn't want to traumatize them without the need to do that. And I think, as a mom, you'll understand that.
Yeah.
Everybody handles it differently. I'm kind of a pragmatist. So I thought, don't scare them unless there's something to be scared of, because anxiety can take a hold from all of us, right? Being afraid of what it could be, and it doesn't heal us, the anxiety and the fears. So I just thought, let me help them deal with the reality if it's true, and then that was my job, is to try to let them know, okay, and I thought we'd find it at stage 1. That's what all those mammograms were for. It was like, if we find it at stage 0, stage 1, it's 98%. We're going to be good, and it just ended up for me being a little bit, just slightly more advanced than that.
Is it stage 2?
It's stage 2B, and that means that they saw the carcinoma. They scheduled me for another MRI, which is fantastic equipment, and confirmed the size of the carcinoma. They looked with the MRI throughout my both breasts to make sure, is there anything else we can see? They looked at my lymph nodes, couldn't see anything else, so we felt pretty confident that it was just one carcinoma. And then once you go in for surgery, and you make the choice, am I going to get a mastectomy? Am I going to get a bilateral mastectomy, right? Or am I going to do a lumpectomy and radiation? I made, a decision that I felt was based on research. I'll get a lumpectomy and make sure I married that with radiation. And it's the same overall survivability had I chosen a mastectomy. So I thought, okay, we're going to do this. The surprise was coming out of surgery, they take a handful of lymph nodes. They're called sentinel lymph nodes. And they send them to pathology in addition to sending your tumor. And then we got the news that the lymph nodes, one of them had a fairly good size piece of cancer, and another one had what they are called isolated tumor cell. So then it was like, oh, darn it. It had grown enough to shed little cancer cells. And that still means I have a good prognosis, but it's more like 85% rather than,
Did you need to
90.
do more after that, after the lumpectomy?
That's a great question. Had I had more cancer in my lymph nodes, they would have gone in and taken more of the lymph nodes out. But they've got some research that if there's just a small amount of cancer in the lymph nodes, that radiating those existing lymph nodes afterwards gives us the same survivability chances as removing other potential ones if they don't look like they might be cancerous. So you've got new research out there that's changing the way things are treated. When my mom was treated 15 years ago, they just took all the lymph nodes out. And, she did a bilateral mastectomy and took all the lymph nodes out. And they're trying to not over-treat women now. So there's this balance of taking out enough, adding enough treatment, but not taking too much out.
As you've been going through this, have you gained any insights about your mom or your grandma?
I know my mom for sure. She was a very strong woman. She had gone through very, very difficult childhood, lots of extreme poverty and issues that were quite painful as a child. And as an adult, she had a bumpy road. And she was just a fighter. And so she felt like when this cancer came into her life, I want to live. She was older, in her 60s. She thought, oh, this is a great time of my life. I want to live. I'm going to do everything I can. And we'd laugh because she would even use foul language like, I'm going to kick this, cancer. And the fact that doing everything she could didn't stop the cancer's progression was so frustrating for her. She did not want to pass away. She did not want to leave her family. And no cancer patients want that, right? But she was so fiercely upset and angry at the disease. And for me, what's slightly different is like, I understand that fight to live, but I would want my children to know I've had a beautiful life, and that I don't want them, I would want them to think that I look back with awe at my life as a mother and as a wife, and to feel some peace if I get there, if that ends up being something I need to face. So I want to be able to utilize her strength, but I also want to leave behind maybe the gift of greater peace of mind for my children. Who knows if that would help them or not.
Right. And I'm sure that's not something they want to hear you talk about right now. That's, to be honest, not something I want to hear you talk about right now, because I just love you so dearly. But is that idea, the mortality, have you been thinking about that a lot?
Well, I think so, because, for about 12 years, I advocated, yearly for Susan G. Komen Foundation. I was volunteering for the American Cancer Society, and they're extraordinarily strong men and women who give their all, and this disease is stubborn, and they lose their battle, if I use that term. So yes, there is a chance, and I'm very aware of that. And I also, you feel this sense of kinship. There are some beautiful, beautiful young moms that are in their 20s and 30s, and, trade places, like if there had to be someone who, survived, of course, I'd want it to be a young mom, So I think about that. Sorry for the emotions, but you think, yeah, of course I'm going to do everything I can, and I'm getting aggressive treatment in order to fight this to my best ability. But I'm very aware that there are hundreds and thousands of women and a few men who would give anything, right, to make sure that they could live as well.
It's just such amazing perspective from you, this love that you have as you're going through this treatment, where it would be so easy to say and to think, why me? How do you have that bone in your body that just leads with love? I mean, it's just amazing.
Oh, you're so kind. we're mortal.
Yeah.
I am very aware that this time in my life, this body of mine, is subject to the its own mortality and humanity. So why me? It has never ever crossed my mind, because I'm a woman, and by nature of being a woman, I'm at risk of breast cancer. So that is a fact that has been a part of my life, right? That I've been familiar with for 20 years or so. So it isn't been something where I feel sorry for myself, but I know the answer is it's because I have a human body, and these things happen to all of us. Yeah. Thank you.
What have you learned about yourself as you've been going through this fight?
Oh, that it's hard for me in some ways to advocate assertively for myself. I have a fantastic medical team that have been providing me treatments, but I found that if I did research and I brought something to the table that was maybe differing from what the healthcare provider was at first presenting to me, it wasn't easy for me to lean forward and say, hey, this is what I want. I would still do it, but then when I'd get home, I'd have this rush of, I sure didn't like having to push for more information, or push for a different type of treatment, or push for more research. It made me uncomfortable, but that is just because my personality tends to be someone that doesn't like conflict. And I think women in general, we're still working on being able to feel very comfortable being assertive, especially in healthcare situations.
Right.
We're taught, and of course these physicians and experts, yes, they know their stuff, but we are individual patients. And so gaining the confidence to say, I want to marry your expertise with my unique body and needs and health, it takes us learning to lean forward. And I think this journey has taught me that I'm still in the process of learning how to comfortably be assertive and advocate for myself, without feeling that sense of, oh, that was hard,
It's amazing because you've spent so many years advocating for others.
Yeah, it's true. But, authority figures, I still am the same woman that, 5 years ago, if I got pulled over for speeding, I would cry when the cop, walked to my window.
Right.
You can be assertive, and then certain situations kind of test your mettle. And so I'm very pleased that I went to medical libraries at Huntsman Cancer Institute. They have medical, access to medical libraries. I spend hours there. I spent hours reading New England Journal of Medicine. I was, anytime that they would take a step where they're going to say, okay, we're going to send your tumor to the lab, then I would search and try to understand medically what was happening. So that way, each time I came to an appointment, I had as much information as I could, because that way I could ask all my questions there, instead of coming in a position of passivity, being passive and having the doctor talk to me, and then me go home and going, what does this mean?
Do you think having that knowledge and the ability to research and the ability to understand, at least in layman's terms, what's going on and what the doctors know, helps give you a little bit more control in the situation?
Oh, absolutely. It feels that way. So for me, and everyone feels very unique, individual about their journey. And through this journey, I've become friends with my listeners. Many of my listeners recently diagnosed, and each of them feel different. Some feel much more anxiety and fear, and I understand that, right? And I mean, we all are going to make different choices, and we all uniquely respond to things. But for me, knowing that the cancer cells, once they said to me, Rebecca, not only is a cancer tumor in your breast, but it got into your lymph nodes, and you have what's called lymphovascular invasion, which means that the cancer cells got into the blood vessels, and your circulation goes throughout your body. So my first thought is, oh, wild horses could possibly be running around my body. The wild horses are out. That feels scary. But once I could learn and study and understand it, then I'd go like, oh, I know why the horses are running. And maybe this type of treatment could help corral them. And so therefore, I feel a sense of driving my treatment and engaging in what I hope to be the cure. And that for me, and I know it's a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm a former news, reporter. And so information to me eases my anxiety. It actually helps me feel empowered. And that's was so important to me. He's trying to balance me feeling empowered, getting the information I need, and then me listening attentively to the expertise of my healthcare providers.
I think it's amazing that through this, you are continuing to advocate. You're continuing to do events. Is the event you have tonight a breast cancer event?
It is.
Tonight you have that? And
I had one Friday night. Yeah, it's a balance, right? When I get my chemo, that day I'm pretty worn out. And then the next couple of days I've learned I tried to go back to work the first time, like on day 5. And it wasn't a good situation. I was too worn out. And so now I take a full week after chemo off. And it's a completely different journey than I thought it would be. You have bone spasms and fatigue and mental fog and nausea. And sometimes just walking around the block, it's like I look like I've been thrown off a horse. I'm so sore. And then a couple days later, it begins to ebb and lift. And by day 8 and 9, my brain is more clear. I'm not at full speed. I haven't felt like I'm at full speed since probably July. But to me, these events that my radio station is partnering and helping to sponsor are so important because where I live in the state of Utah, it has it's ranked 48th for mammogram screenings. In other words,
wow,
we have women who have insurance who are choosing not to get mammograms, and who are over the age of 40. And so, not quite 1/3, but a large portion of Utah women are not getting their mammograms. And maybe it's because there's been confusing information about should you not, do I need them? Maybe it's because Huntsman Cancer Institute is the place, the researchers that found the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. And we learned, wow, there's a connection to family history. And maybe we thought if I have no family history, I'm good, when the reality is it's only 10%. That family history and genetics plays in. So 90% of the breast cancers out there, it's not connected to that. Maybe we have some confusion about trusting getting screening. Maybe there's confusion about whether it's really necessary. Whatever it is, if I can get one more person to get screened, 2 more people to get screened, and help remind them that it saves lives, that finding this, I had one mammogram, it was 16 months between mammograms that went from nothing on the screen to stage 2B.
That's what I was going to ask. Just unbelievable. It moves so fast.
Right. And in some cases it's very slow, but it sure seems to me that once it starts to grow, it grows faster. So that's why, to me, it's so important. You could ask a woman a question. She might not even know the answer. Do you have dense breast tissue? She might not know that answer, but every woman should know that answer because that affects your risks and how often you should get your mammogram. So we have a ways to go. And if I just did this individually, quietly, privately, I would lose the opportunity to have someone learn from my experience. I wish I hadn't waited 16 months between my mammograms. I wish it was just 12 months.
I was going to ask you why it was so important to you to do this. And it's just so obvious in the passion in your voice that this impacts lives. This makes a difference. And that's why you're doing this.
Absolutely.
In between chemo.
In between.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so the mission
And
of doing this is so strong for you that in between chemo you make this happen. I just think it's incredible.
oh, you're so kind. There are better days in what they call the chemo cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So you can. It's almost like an endurance sport. Your whole body is exhausted and tapped out, and then it begins to regain. And so I'm on a fairly good day today. A week ago, my mind might have been more foggy or fuzzy, but I think the world, by and large, is just such a good, beautiful place that your car breaks down on the side of the road, somebody's going to pull over and help.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the more transparent we are, the more others can see themselves in our situation,
Mm-hmm.
and see, well, if it can happen to Rebecca, who ran the St. George Marathon 4 years ago, right? Tries to take care of her health, etc. It could happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it can. But if we find it early, if we're not afraid, and that's one of my fears, though, is like, I have on social media and on air mentioning, right, I'm bald. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm bald. I'm not as strong as I used to be. You gain weight, you get bloated. It's not a pretty self-confidence, ridden experience. And I hope by sharing some of that doesn't scare women from finding out, because the truth is, if they find it early, their journey is going to be even easier than mine,
Mm-hmm. I love that in your journey, you have accepted that although bald is beautiful, you want to keep the wigs. Tell me about finding that inner strength to deal with those things you mentioned in the self-love department.
I don't even know if it's inner strength. Like I look in the mirror when I don't have any hair on, and I just don't like what I'm seeing on me. I mean, I can look at others. I have, one of our listeners' friends who is absolutely beautiful bald, and it looks great on her, and I champion her. It just looks so foreign on me that it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I hop out of the shower, I don't stand in front of the mirror bald for an extended period of time. I kind of like do my little quick jog, then put a little beanie on, then come back in.
Yeah.
Because I'm still in that, the acceptance part of it. I don't look like me,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've experienced that with pregnancy, that you get to 8 or 9 months and your body's changed so much and you go like, this doesn't look a lot like me. So still trying to re-identify who I am. And it's not, that part's not been easy. I'm not being strong anymore. Not having the endurance, but there are definitely incredible women that are facing later stage diagnoses that are having to tap into wells of strength and courage that go way beyond what I am currently facing. And I'm aware and sensitive and respectful to the fact that me being bald is maybe a small price to pay for trying to kill these tumor cells.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you're not strong anymore?
I'm not very strong anymore. Like on one chemo day, the day after chemo, it might take everything I have to walk around the block. And, I remember last time I broke down in tears because there was just a slight incline.
Yeah.
I thought, I don't even have that physical strength. Spend a lot of time down trying to rest, even though I'm trying to work at the same time. I miss that. But I know my body inside is working, it's got a little choo-choo engine doing its best to try to fight the cancer. So, there's a big picture of strength, but certainly I miss that.
It must be frustrating having your mind wanting to do something and your body not being there.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a immune disease a couple years ago called Graves' disease, and they had to do an emergency thyroidectomy on me. And that was the first time in my life that I faced not having strength. And that was an important recognition lesson for me, because I have been blessed most of my life with health. And there are a lot of courageous people who have faced very difficult health limitations. throughout their life, and they have to have an identity outside of their ability, right, to lift furniture, to do yard work, to run, or whatever we identify strength with. They've had to re to set a bar differently, and so I'm just back at it again, relearning, like, okay, strength should be identified and defined differently.
And I want to point out that even as you talk about that, you have gratitude that you have had physical strength and health the majority of your life. I think that's really an incredible perspective as well. Can you tell me about maybe last Friday or any time that you've talked to the public or come face to face with people about this? Maybe a story that has touched your heart and really kind of been the fuel that has said, I have to keep sending this message.
That's beautiful. I think that, going to a public event and sharing my experience and encouraging people to get the mammogram makes me feel more connected to the community and hopefully reaches somebody in that audience. But I got to tell you that I get much more gratitude on the behind the scenes, whether private messages come in through Facebook Messenger and women who are struggling and or strengthening me. I think that I have found more personal gratification in that. That message that comes to you at 10 o'clock at night that says, I'm really scared. I've got my surgery tomorrow, and is everything going to be okay? And then to be able to just reach out individually. And as I mentioned, to have people come and individually drop off soup to me when I need it. I think that has been the thing that has softened my heart the most, because in a big public situation, you can get a lot of messaging out. But really what changes us, it feels, is the one-on-one, letting people know that they're cared for.
When you're on those worst days of chemo, how do those messages impact your fight? How is that really coming into your life on a day-to-day?
I am so lucky by being in a community. I live in a neighborhood. I've been there for 20 years. So, all my neighborhood galvanized for me. Outside of me being a media personality that has 600,000 listeners every week, right? I mean, we have a big broadcast audience that can hear some of this messaging. And my neighborhood, I've been there for so long. As soon as this diagnosis occurred, they got going and printed Team Rebecca T-shirts, and each bought, over 100 and had a barbecue for me. And so there, I've never felt alone. So I have, for my needs, my husband, my children have come to chemos with me. My sisters and brother would text me and call, came into town, right? So it felt like my loved ones, my neighborhood, the people closest to me made sure that me as an individual, as a person, was being taken care of. And that it's just overwhelmingly beautiful. The private messages is my way of saying I'm being taken care of, and I want to pass that forward, right? Let's make sure nobody else feels alone, and that's difficult to accomplish. But there are support groups online, on Facebook, et cetera, groups of breast cancer patients who are constantly 24 hours a day answering each other's messages and saying, I love you. I hope everything's okay, to people they've never met from around the world. It's incredibly beautiful. My breast cancer sisters, I mean, it goes on. And on those groups, you can say, I don't know what to expect for chemo tomorrow. This is my type of chemo, TC. What's going to happen? Then boom, the comments come. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's the beautiful part of humanity. What do you want everyone to know about breast cancer, about mammograms? What message do you want to make sure everyone hears you say?
The messages are two or threefold. One is, this is our body. We should do what we can to take care of it and honor it, in the sense that women, we have to know, like when you look on the outside of your skin and your hand, if it suddenly changed color, you'd see it right away. Breast tissue is different. You have to go in to get a mammogram to be able to see what individually inside your normal tissue is like, so that when changes come down the road, it can be spotted and recognized. So first of all, you go to get a mammogram for a baseline. It's not just about, to look for cancer. It's to get a baseline, see what your normal tissue is. Number two, from the time we're in our teens and our 20s, we need to do self-exams and know what our healthy breasts feel like, because everybody's feels differently. Some are full of knots. Others are much more fatty tissue that just feels soft. What does yours feel like, so that when you do feel something, you recognize it? So just because it's a part of our body that we typically cover and we're not aware of, maybe we have still further down the road to say, you know what, this is a part of my body I can learn more about. Because listen, your family loves you. We all have what we call kind of like surrogate families or adopted family members, people who are like family to us. They love you. And they want you to take care of yourself, and the world needs you. And so we can't put it on a back burner. I would want women to say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this mammogram because the people in my life love me, and I deserve to have a healthy life. And if I get these screenings, there's much greater chance I'll find it early, and my treatment will be early, easier, my prognosis better. So I'm going to put fear aside and have the courage to take care of each other. And then the other thing I want people to know is that the love they give to people who are in need, again, whether it's a physical health challenge or a mental health challenge, it matters. And it does strengthen us, and it does take us out of isolation. And so I'm overwhelmed and full of gratitude for every person who has championed me and encouraged me and dropped off, soft socks and warm soup, because it's buoyed me, and at a time which could be very, very scary, but feels less scary because of everybody's help.
Wow. That's amazing. And that's such good advice. I think sometimes we think it needs to be something huge, but you mentioned even Facebook messages making that difference. So the last thing I want to ask, this podcast is all about finding joy in the good, the bad, and the in-betweens of life. What would be your number one tip to doing that, finding that regular joy?
Finding a regular joy. Be alive while you're alive. So every day, I used to walk, if not every day, run every day. And I used to, I'd walk with friends or walk by myself, and I'd have to remind myself, hey, don't just look down, look up. Like, look at these beautiful mountains around me. Look at the sky, look around. And my mother used to always say, did you hear that bird? Oh. She was always like, oh, look at that flower. My mom was always about, try to see the beauty or listen to that music around you. And so that's how I think we find joy. I know there's a big movement in being present and not being caught in the future and the past, but literally while you're alive, which every day we have, is be aware of what you're smelling, be aware of what you're seeing, be aware of the love that's around you, be aware of your dreams, and enjoy this day, because there is always something beautiful around us. It's just sometimes retraining ourselves to see that and look at that and cherish that. And obviously anyone on a cancer journey, it's magnified. We could let the fears, cause more shadows, but I think we can meet those fears a little bit more easily if we are absorbing and recognizing the beautiful things around us.
That's beautiful. Such great advice. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I love you. I have always loved you for like a decade and a half now.
Since you were 18, I loved you too.
And I'm just I'm in such awe watching this watching your fight on social media, and how you've used it to also advocate for so many women who don't even know you're advocating for them yet. And I think it's incredible the way that you're using your fight to help others. And
Well,
I'm just in awe, as I always have been.
Well, thank you. And, it's not a surprise to me that your podcast is dedicated to finding joy in life, because you've always had that spark and you've always cherished that spark. And thank goodness for people like you making the world more beautiful. And I love you as much. I don't know how old you are now. I could kind of guess, but I think I've loved you for 20 years.
Yeah, it's something like that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you love this episode. If there is anything you do after listening to this episode today, I hope it is call to get your mammogram scheduled. Those words Rebecca said, these words, they hit me. She said, I wish it wouldn't have been 16 months. Remember, she waited 16 months instead of 12 between mammograms. Get your mammogram scheduled. I hope that's at least one thing you learned from Rebecca, although I always feel, and I felt this way when I was 18, that I learned so much from her. So I hope that was the same case for you as you listened. In the meantime, I am linking Rebecca's social media accounts, and make sure to subscribe so you hear the next episode. In our next episode, I'm going to be talking about holding on to identities, how that can be dangerous for your growth. And I want to thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.